Hi, my name is Garnet Hertz, and this is an overview of the Disobedient electronics book project. So I started this project in late 2016. I made a call for submissions soon after the US election. I had moved to Canada, but had lived in the United States for 12 years before that. And I was interested in looking at work from artists and designers that used electronics in a interesting way to highlight social problems, and that used design and electronic objects for political ends. So I made a call for submissions. I believe it was the day after the U.S. election, and about 100 people sent me projects, and I collected them together in this handmade book. So I made 300 copies of this. It has a binding that was done with a sewing machine, and the printing was done with inkjet printer, and I made an edition of 300 and gave these away. I only gave them away to people that I thought would be interested in the project. I wasn't able to give, it turned out that more than 300 people were interested in the project, but for the 300 copies that I did give away, I gave them away to people who were interested in contributing to the project, which I'll explain later. So the project starts with sort of this idea of post-truth and the political scene in 2016 and into 2017, where there's a lot of stuff happening. Populist movements were gaining traction, and in my own work, I felt that my own studio work wasn't really addressing bigger issues around the direction of kind of popular culture and essentially problems that people were having in the world, and unfairness and injustices and stuff like this. But I wanted to bring together these works and to look at how this type of work responds to political issues. So, and I'm not going to explain here all of the different projects. What I'll do is I'll highlight a few of them. This is a project called Abortion Drone that is led by a group called Women on Waves. The way that this project works is it takes a drone, and in this case it took morning after pills, so medication for women, and it went from Germany into Poland. So it flies across a border. They get arrested in Poland, and it's used to highlight how laws are different in different locations. And women's health is something that I wanted to highlight here. It's definitely a big issue in the United States and also in Canada, but it's obviously something that affects a lot of people, which is an understatement, and it's a human rights issue. So I wanted to look at that. Also, I wanted to, there's a little kind of shout out here to the open source abortion project. that wasn't an electronics project, but I wanted to highlight there as a sidebar. This is a project called the 79% Work Clock. And I did an interview with Jamie Carrero of an ad agency called Party New York that came up with this concept. I didn't want to exclude any projects that were done commercially because I think that it's important for agencies and companies to pay attention to provocative work, and I think that this type of work should be commended and not excluded from, as it typically is, from festivals and art publications. So this project works by its main kind of core principle is that women get paid considerably less than guys do for the same type of work. So the way that this works is that there is a alarm and a custom-built clock here, but this clock, you set it to 79% of your workday, or a workday, and when the clock gets to that point, let's say if you work a 9-to-5 job and 79% of your workday is, 3:30 in the afternoon, the alarm goes off, and the idea here is that the women in the office aren't getting paid after that point, or the equivalent of not getting paid after that point, and can go off for drinks or go home or whatever. And to the other people in the office, they would hear this as a reminder of that wage gap. So I thought that this was quite an elegant project that highlights that in a very nice, tangible way. Anina Roost made a project that also highlights how another project on gender gap and how in galleries and museums how women are underrepresented in those art institutions. So this project involves making pies. So a robot that makes these pies that visualize the misrepresentation of women in those institutions. This is a project called Period Share that is a kind of a bit of a spoof on internet-enabled everything, and is done as a almost like a Kickstarter joke, where the idea that you want everything shared all the time is maybe challenged through a parody. Plus, these panties don't look very comfortable also. But this was done as a kind of as a provocative kind of project to say, like, okay, internet-enabled everything is maybe not the way to go in terms of your privacy and quality of life. Some projects by Naomi Wu and Janet Hansen. I also wanted to highlight some historical projects. This is the home surgery instructions from the Barbie Liberation Organization. The idea here, and this was done in 1993. the idea for this project is that they went into stores in 1993, bought a whole bunch of electronic talking Barbies and G.I. Joe. So the Barbies, by default, would say things like, "I want to go to the mall," or "I love shopping." And the G.I. Joes were all, you know, hyper violent, like "eat lead" or whatever. The way that this worked is that they had went and bought a whole bunch of these toys, went back into a lab, swapped out these electronic control circuits, and swapped the voices, and then they put them back into into the boxes and put them into the stores. So they went back and returned them to the stores, and then kids in Christmas of 1993 opened them up, and they had Barbies that would say like "die," and G.I. Joes that would say "I love doing my hair," or whatever. And so I thought it was kind of a clever way to use electronics in a way that highlights pretty kind of stereotypical gendered stuff with Barbies or G.I. Joes. And they distributed this project also as a set of instructions. This is a project, and this is actually part of a body of really incredible work by Airboo and Irene, Airboo Kerbach and Irene Posh. I'd actually met Irene at in London and saw some more of her work. They're doing really fantastic work where they're incorporating discrete electronic components into the knit fabric of a wearable sweater. It's really fantastic work. I think it's one of the most innovative wearable computing type of projects that I've seen, so it's worth checking out. This is a project called ProBots by Chris Csikszentmihalyi and his crew in Madeira in Portugal. These are kind of likable, kludgy, look like they're made kind of with 2x4 and very kind of a hacked kind of look type of robots that go around and are sort of protest robots. That's a great project, and the crew in Madeira had written up at the Critical Technical Practice Lab in Madeira had written this up to describe the project. This project by Oliveira and Chen called Backslash was one of the first, and actually this project was one of the first that I had seen that was really explicitly electronic design for the user being a street protester. That kind of encouraged me to look for more examples like this. So these projects are really kind of the genesis of this project. The way that this works is that this is a bracelet that you hit the button and it alerts your people, your friends, where you are. It's like a wearable panic button in case your phone gets taken away. Cell phone jammer. offline network in case cell phone networks go down or your Wi-Fi. A system to back up your personal data. Keep in mind that this was done kind of before cloud computing, and similar type of systems were quite prevalent. So this automatically backs up your photos and videos in case your phone gets smashed or taken away, and keeps it in a alternate location. This is a project by the Bureau of Inverse Technology, featuring Kate Rich and Natalie Jermenjenko in 2002, that counts people at a public event. Now, if you're aware of the Trump inauguration, the amount of people at a public event really is political. People who organize events will give one estimate of, let's say, 1 million people or 100,000 people out. Officials tend to, by a factor of 10, have a different figure, often lower. So this project worked with a model rocket, a camera, some custom software that counts heads, and it's designed to be a tool to facilitate trying to get an accurate number of how many people are at an occupation or crowd event or protest. Now this project, Robotic Graffiti Writer by the Institute of Applied Autonomy, launched in 1998, and the way that it worked is that these spray cans pointed down. There was an onboard computer here and a remote control system that this thing would drive around like a remote controlled car. I mean, it is based on the drivetrain of a remote controlled truck, and it would, like a dot matrix printer, write messages on the ground. Now, what's interesting about the Graffiti Writer is that this tool later went on, and the group, Institute for Applied Autonomy, went on to form a piece of software called TextMob to facilitate peer-to-peer communication between people on their cell phones for the purposes of protest, which later got knocked off and warped into Twitter. And so I like to think of this machine as sort of, these is kind of like the first tweets. It's interesting to see with Twitter how it really did have activist roots and is now just sort of a mass tool. This is a student project out of Carnegie Mellon that has a wearable collar that emotes your moods in places where you don't really have the liberty to speak out verbally. A robot by Sawang-di and Ishikawa that makes paper airplanes and shoots them out. Matt Kenyon and Doug Easterly made this improvised empathetic device that has a pin that pokes you in the arm whenever there is a casualty in the US-led war in Iraq. And so this monitors those statistics and jabs you in the arm as a reminder of the ongoing violence. There are a few projects that had to do with gun control, which is obviously a topic of concern in the United States. This project by Scott Kildall has a bunch of starter pistols that more or less flip around in a space and track things sort of randomly and creates a kind of a scary environment with a bunch of guns. Kind of a gun non-control. This project is really kind of very clever. This is called Campus Carry Doorbell Wreaths, done at UT Dallas by the feminist makerspace there. This project responds to the ability for students and faculty or anybody else to carry a handgun onto campus. And the provision in that law says that that you can actually give a disclaimer that forbids weapons from, or concealed weapons or handguns from being carried into classrooms and offices if you give this verbal notice. So the way that this project worked is that there's a recorded like a voice sound chip inside of here, and these are done as doorbell kind of wreaths that read out this statement that weapons are not permitted in that room. And so it's done as a doorbell, so the person rings the doorbell. It gives this legal disclaimer, and it sort of gets around the ability for students to carry guns in a clever way. Transparency Grenade by Julian Oliver. Perhaps one of the better known projects in the book. It basically works to try to increase corporate and government transparency. So it's really done like almost like a wiretapping device in an ornamental case that uses a gumsticks type of computer inside that runs Linux and transmits data that it intercepts and audio and so forth, and moves it to a remote location. So the idea here is that it's that corporate and government transparency is a problem, and this is a device to try to rectify that. This is a project by Roman Torre and Angeles Angulo called Theroux. This works as a encryption kind of hub with 4 different settings of how much encryption or privacy you want by twisting this triangular knob on the face of this router kind of appliance. And so if you turn it 1 notch, you have some security options. The second one, you have it as a Tor relay. The next, you have access point without social distraction. You block social websites. The last setting is a blackout, only local navigation and local kind of networking. And it works with a Raspberry Pi inside. So this is something that kind of sees encryption and privacy as a core design feature. This is a project that by Matthew Clapman called Integrated Entropic Sanitization, that kind of in the style of James Bond. I don't know if you remember the James Bond movies that say, like, this message will self-destruct in 30 seconds. This is really kind of like the circuit design proposal for building a destructive mechanism into the integrated circuit with an antenna and a governor, like something that physically burns out the memory on your chip. So once again, sort of taking privacy as a main feature that is something to be integrated right into the chip. This is a system that simulates a cat walking on your keyboard. The idea here is to assume that people are being monitored by governments, and that internet surveillance is a kind of an everyday real thing, and to try to introduce noise into that system to make monitoring of it more difficult. So another kind of information security type of project proposal. There were a couple of projects that highlighted environmental issues. This is a project by the audio artist Matt Walker that responds to sort of the natural place that cities used to be, the ecological sort of changes that happens in cities. What Matt does is he does field recordings in natural environments and then takes them with this more or less like a sound cannon and rebroadcasts them in the space. His concept is that that this makes it more legible what cities used to be, and how sees it as an intervention, reminding people of the ecology of what cities used to be. And this is a kind of a montage by Laura Forlan with a number of different proposals on, clocks, clothes, and sort of sketched out a number of different ideas and politics behind things. So that's the last project. And so what I did is I made a web page that people could fill out a form and request a copy, whether they were teaching a course, maybe they were doing an exhibition, maybe they were doing research related to this area, or maybe they were just interested in this. So they could go to the webpage that I set up at disobedientelectronics.com and fill out the form and kind of contribute back to the project, and I mailed them one of these copies. So that's how this project is. Hope you enjoyed that overview. Thanks.